Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we find ourselves Ben HaMitzarim, we find ourselves in between the straits, in the narrow straits, in a place where there's constriction in the world, in a person's life, in a person's experience. And Chazal describe Ben HaMitzarim, they describe the time in between the straits, the narrow straits, as a difficult time period, a time period where we collectively mourn over that which is lost, or we collectively yearn after that which is not yet present. But our tzaddikim, the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, give us a new lens, not a new lens, but they reveal to us the inherent lens that Chazal were hinting to, in the sense that we take the pasuk Kol Rodfeha Hisiguha Ben HaMitzarim, all those who chase her, all those who chase after Knesset Yisrael, all those who chase after the princess, are going to catch her in Ben HaMitzarim. The implication of that pasuk is that it's a time of danger, it's a time of struggle, it's a time where an enemy has the capacity to come closer than they typically do, and that capture is at hand. But Zak the Heilige Kashnitzer Magid, in the name of the Rebbe of Baruch, as well as the name of the Magid, that Kol Rodfei Ka Hisiguha Ben HaMitzarim, that anybody who chases after Yud Kei, anybody who chases after Yud Kei, the sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, anybody who chases after Chachma, anybody who chases after Bina, understanding, a desire to have a mind that knows HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to have a heart that feels HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spend the year chasing after that. Kol Rodev Ka, every person is Meradef Achar Ka, has a redif of the machshava, a chasing of the mind, as Rabbi Nachman describes in the 24th teaching, that chases after HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that chase very often seems to be a failed one. Rabbi Nachman has a famous mashal that he gives over, that there was a king who decided to go out and hunt for a deer with his chevra, with his soldiers. And after an entire day and multiple days chasing after this deer, chasing, it was decreed, it was announced that people were going to return. It was futile. There was no chance of catching the deer. And the Melech says to his people, he says that you go and do what you want. You have the capacity to return back home. But once I've started chasing, I can't stop chasing. And there's a certain element within each and every neshama that can't stop chasing, even though we try and chase and we don't arrive, and we try and chase and we don't arrive. And the natural tendency towards giving up hope is a likely option for a person, God forbid. Nevertheless, once we've began the chase, we're not going to stop. Everybody who chases after HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ultimately going to find. But when are they going to find? Bein HaMitzarim specifically. Specifically in the time, in the narrow time where things are difficult, where things appear to be far from a person. Where, like the pasuk in Eicha says, Rachik mimeni menachem meshiv nafshi, that the compassion, the restoration, the comfort of my spirit remains distant from me. Rachik mimeni menachem meshiv nafshi. And what I want to try and talk about just for a moment is the nature, is the notion that we specifically have the ability of finding HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this time of Ki rachik mimeni menachem meshiv nafshi, that the comfort, the restoration, the salvation, the redemption of my spirit appears to be far from me. And how it can align with this teaching of Kol Rodfei Ka, everybody who chases after HaKadosh Baruch Hu will find him, Ben HaMitzarim, specifically in the time that appears to be difficult, specifically at the time where a person doesn't seem to have moichin, or a person doesn't seem to have conscious awareness of godliness, or a person is tired, or a person is broken down. And so in order to understand a little bit, we have to begin to reorient ourselves towards the positions or the positioning of Avodas Hashem. B'derech klal, when a person is focusing on a singular item, a singular object, a singular point, the nekuda ha'emtza is, there's a firm foundation point that rests at the center of things. And therefore, the more proximate I come to that center, the closer I will be and the better off I will be. And the more distant I am and the more removed I am will be how far I am and how concealed I am. That kiruv, that closeness, that hiskarvus, that the coming closer, slowly but surely entering in on the domain of desire, to that place of finding what I've been looking for my whole life, we assume that kiruv, closeness, is better, and that richuk is something that distances me, and it applies a value judgment to where I find myself, and that distance is bad. But what our tzaddikim teach us is to reverse everything that we think we know in terms of our relationship with godliness and what is good and what is wrong in our eyes and what keeps us distant or what keeps us close. And it tells us to reorient the perception of distance, to reorient what it means to be close and what it means to be far from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. that yes, kirvas aleikum litoiv, that we want the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Closeness is ultimately the purpose of all things, lehisanig ala Kadosh Baruch Hu, to find tainug with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that closeness. But what we have to reorient ourselves towards is that richuk, distance, is not the opposite of closeness. Distance, as we typically understand it in a spatial sense, it's not the distance away from being close, but rather distance is a new way of being close. That there's no such thing as not being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything. He's Mamalik Kalalman, he's Soiviv Kalalman, and the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, to the degree of Kula Kaima Kiloi Chashiva, that nothing exists. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything, Einoin Milvado, and therefore it is impossible to speak of a distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Memela, what that means is that if we can't speak of a distance anymore, but we see a concept of distance, then we need to reorient to ourselves towards what distance means. And in this context, distance just means another relative positioning in terms of the proximity or the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That there's a way of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of kiruv, by being very close, face to face, where things are moving clearly and smoothly. And then there's a way of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'derech richuk. That richuk is not a distancing from God, God forbid. There is no distancing from God. That richuk is another way of coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same way that instead of looking at concealment as absence, we speak of concealment as a further presencing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that appears as absence. So too, when we look at distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'derech rechoika, when we operate by way of distance, what we come to understand is that that way of operating by way of a distance is in truth a way of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, except it feels like distance. That in truth the moich and the katnas are also moichin, they just feel like moich and the katnas. And so when we look at richuk in this sense, when we look at distance in the sense not as a distance away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but as a way of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the feeling of distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we begin to transform the very notion of distance into a notion of closeness, and we can come to understand how we can relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in times of richuk as well. The pasuk says, "Ki rachok mimeni menachem meshav nafshi." That when I can understand ki rachok mimeni, when I can come to understand that, yeah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're far from me right now. I feel very far from you. I don't have that yishuv hadas. I don't have that menuchas hanefesh. There's bahala. There's pizar hanefesh. There's bilbul. There's daiga. There's all of the different emotional experiences that a person can plan all they want to prevent from ever entering into until they're in it, because there's no preparation available to prevent the person from falling into those places. And a person finds themselves in that state of daiga or bilbul hanefesh, there's no preparation or hachana that can prepare a person for what it means to try and find HaKadosh Baruch Hu specifically in the place that it feels like a person cannot connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the daiga is too strong, that the richuk is too great. But when we come to understand that ki rachok mimeni, that in truth, this distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also a way of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's a derech rechoika, and the secret of Pesach Sheni is that we transform derech rechoika into a new way of being miskarev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the secret of Lam Mani Gara, why should I lose out simply because I don't feel close? What, I should feel distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu just because I feel distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Since when does the way that I think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's closeness to me have any impact on the true reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ever-present, never not expressive light of infinitude that finds expression in every single aspect of a person's life, no matter how far or how close they feel? And when we transform that derech rechoika into a lamani gara, why should I lose out? We come to understand that rechoika mimeni is just another way of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and at that point, it's menachem meshav nafshi. Ki rachok mimeni, when I come to understand Rabbeinu Shalom, I'm speaking to you about how distant you are from me. And Memela, if I'm speaking to you about how distant you are from me, or I'm contemplating how distant you are from me, that means I'm still thinking about you. That means I'm still speaking to you about it. That means the unconscious murmurs of my heart are still questioning where you are. And Memela, by the very dint of the questioning heart, I come to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here, because if he wasn't here, why would I be questioning it? Why would I even feel that he should be here? The very absence that I feel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's closeness is the very giloy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close at hand, that there's an irreducible trace of godliness that exists in every place, no matter how far. And at that moment, ki rachok mimeni, that I feel that there's a richuk, there's a distance from me. At that point, menachem meshav nafshi, I can say, Rabbeinu Shalom, at least I feel distance from you. At least I feel distant from you. At least I'm aware that the one thing that I need in order to alleviate the symptoms of distance from you is closeness to you. And in that moment, what I've come to experience is a closeness that comes about by way of richuk, because if it were not for the richuk, if there was no distancing, if there was no sense of abandonment, or no sense of being separated, or no sense of being ignored, or no sense of being forgotten, then there would be no joy that comes about with the recognition that I'm never forgotten, I'm always remembered, and that I'm never abandoned, I'm always close, and I'm never isolated, I'm always together, and I'm never far, I'm always connected. That the Yishav Hadas, the Nechama that comes along with that, the Nechama Bekaflayim, not only do I feel close, but I've come to realize that even when I feel most distant from you, Rabbeinu Shalom, I'm so close to you. Mirachok Hashem nirali, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to me from a distance. It doesn't mean that I experienced God when I stood at a distance from God. It means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to me by way of distance, in the Richuk itself, in the very sense of Hashem, where are you in this matzav? I come to uncover the light of the Rabbeinu Shalom. I come to uncover the Menachem Meshiv Nafshi, the redemption and the comforting of my spirit, to come to realize that I'm never away from you, Rabbeinu Shalom. Mimerchak tavilachma, that the Shechina HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides lechem, provides sustenance, provides all of the birurim necessary to refine and rectify this concealed place in which we live, to the point that Mashiach Tzidkenu is ready to arrive. It comes mimerchak tavilachma, that we bring the sustenance to HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavyachol b'derech richuk, mimerchak tavilachma. I come from a distance, Rabbeinu Shalom. From the distance you appear to me, Rabbeinu Shalom. You appear to me in the guise of distance. You appear to me in a sense of richuk. And when I come to realize that that distance is just another way of being Mekusher HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then I come to realize that Leis Aser Panim Minei, there's no place distance from you, Rabbeinu Shalom. And Kechashecha Ka'oyer, when I feel you, you're here. When I don't feel you, you're here. When I'm convinced you're not here, you're here. When I'm convinced you're here, you're here. When I'm convinced I'm close, I'm close. When I'm convinced I'm far, I'm close. I'm never not close, because all there is the Rabbeinu Shalom. All there is the neshama, that it is a perpetual tefillah and a perpetual conversation with the Shechina HaKadosh, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Rabbeinu Shalom. How can I come close to you in this world? How can I remove all the distances? How can I come to believe in you again? How can I come to find you in this broke down place that you sent us down into? Yes, I remember I took a shvua. Yes, I remember Tehi Tzadik Val Tiheh Rasha. But Rabbeinu Shalom, Bein HaMitzarim, it's hard, it's constricted, the mind is tired, and there's a heaviness. How can I find you here? There's a perpetual conversation at the heart of the spirit of Mimerchak Tavilachma. Like Miriam Hanaviyah, V'ta'amod merachok, she sees Moshe Rabbeinu from a rachok, from a distance. From a distance, Miriam is the merirus, Miriam is the bitterness, Miriam is the mar mimavis, it's the feeling of bein hametzarim mamish, where it's difficult, where I don't have that comfort, I don't feel remembered, I don't feel that love, that unconditional love and connection that I know is so deeply true. I don't feel it, I'm bored, there's an emptiness to it, Rabbeinu Shalom. And that Merirus, that Miriam stands from afar, and it accesses the light of Moshe Rabbeinu. The light of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Or Ki Tov, the light of Das, the light of Mibein Shnei HaKruvim, the light of the unity of all things. The Nekuda HaPnimis, the Evan HaShasiyah, the light of the Tzadikim, alive and in the graves. That light of Moshe Rabbeinu, Raya Mehemna, that Min Hamayim Mishisihu, that comes about from a place beyond our minds, that Hisyashvas Hadas of Moshe Rabbeinu, that capacity like Moshe Rabbeinu, so when told that he's not going to make it into Eretz Yisrael, when told that his entire life's dream is not going to take shape in front of his eyes, the first thing that he asks is, what about the Jewish people? What about the other person? That light of Moshe Rabbeinu, of bittul betachlis, of anava and shiflus amitas, where it comes to a point where I can write, where Moshe Rabbeinu could write, like Rabbi Nachman says, he could write, ani anav mikol adam, that I am more humble than anybody, because the true shiflus of Moshe is the ability to be so mukusher to the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that I don't have to think about distance or closeness anymore. And when the Merirusa de Alma, that difficulty, that Mimercha Tavilachma, that Merirus, that Miriam wants to see Moshe, it's Ta'amud Merachok. She sees him from afar. Sometimes the avoida of the Merirus, to be Mahapich, the Merirus into Mesikus, to be Mamtik Mar B'mar, to transform the difficulty and the concealment into a place of connectivity, it means to stand Merachok, Ya'amud Merachok. That the nation stood from afar, that we accessed HaKadosh Baruch Hu from afar, to believe and to come to know that you're with us even when we're not close to you, Rabbeinu Shalom, because we're always close to you. And this is the secret of Bein HaMitzarim, to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'derech merchak, Like the Svarma Kadoshim say, Rachuk is the gematria of Shakai, which is the ability to say, Dai be'elukusa l'chobriya v'briya. You're here with me right now, whether I'm close or far, whether that person appears closer, whether that person appears farther. None of it bears any impact on my closeness or my distance, because there's nothing but closeness. And to transform the derech rechoika into a menachem meshiv nafshi. Dr. Rabbi Nachman in Torah Samachei says something incredible. Everything Rabbeinu says is incredible. But Rabbi Nachman says as follows. Rabbi Nachman says as follows after describing the fact that a person can live in this world and can feel difficulty, can feel all of the struggles that a person feels in this world. But in truth, if a person pays attention to the tachlis, if a person pays attention to the innermost point, which is the intention of a Kadosh Baruch Hu in this world, which is the true fact that I'm always close to you, Rebbeinu Shalom, and you're always close to me, and tzaddikim are close, and the neshama is close, and that ahava is close, and that tikkun is close, and that redemption is close, and that emes is close. When we come to realize that betachlis, kol tachlis, everything is close, meaning to say what Hashem really wants from this world, lo yelo yisurim klal, that a person is no longer going to see the distance, a person is no longer going to see the concealment as difficulty. It's not going to hurt as much. Because in truth, the purpose of everything is to see the ultimate good in everything. Adarabah, that I should be filled with a joy, with a closeness of coming to realize, Hashem, I have the opportunity now to reveal you from a distance. I have the opportunity now, Merachok Hashem nirali, to reveal that you're all so close when I'm far, and that you're always close, and that in truth there's no negativity and there's no distance. The only difficulty we fall into in this world is that, as Rabbi Nachman says, I lose my focus, I lose my attention, I lose my intentionality. I give myself over to the natural proclivity of the self that wants to be swept away with the nuances of all the ruminations and all the emotional difficulties and all the things out of our control and in our control. And we lose our das, we lose the nakud of Moshe Rabbeinu. Miriam stands from afar, to the extent that I can no longer look at the tachlis anymore. And when a person falls away from the tachlis, then all it feels like is rachuk mimeni. And a person hasn't transformed that rachuk mimeni into a menachem meshiv nafshi. And Rabbi Nachman continues, and a person, when they come to lose sight of the tachlis, which is all good, and a person begins to feel pain, and a person begins to feel suffering, and a person begins to feel forlorn or lost. Because when a person is das, when a person has their mind to them, when a person is able to keep in mind what the ultimate purpose of all things is, which is kirvas aleikim litoiv, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to reveal himself b'dafka b'derech harichuk. Dafka b'derech harichuk, in the dir b'tachtoinim mamish, which is the most rachuk that it can possibly be. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be revealed there, needs to be revealed there. The tachlis of the bria is to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu there, in the place of the bein hamitzarim. At that point, the person comes to look at the tachlis, and they no longer feel all of the intensity of the struggle. The struggle is still there, but a person doesn't feel the intensity of it. And Zot Rabbi Nachman b'zetov in davar ne'elam v'nistar. And with this, a person will understand a truly profound and hidden thing, that in the nature of the human being, in the physical body experience of the individual, when a person is experiencing some type of pain, God forbid, for example, if a person cuts themselves or a person gets cut in one way or another, what a person does is they close their eyes, they squint their eyes with intensity in order to alleviate the pain that they're feeling. There's a squinting of the eyes, there's a clenching of the eyes, a closing of the eyes. We see this physically speaking, we see this expression in our bodies, that when a person wants to look at something that is very far, when a person wants to look at something shu rachok mimenu, as I say, then a person closes their eyes, squints their eyes to see farther, and a person contracts their eyes and squints to the degree that they can focus in on the one particular distant thing that they want to see. And the reason for this is because vision is the way of the self sending itself outwards to retrieve things from a distance. And the farther things are, the harder I have to look, and I have to look farther and farther. And if I look quickly, I can't grasp something, so I have to squint my eyes and to see beyond the difficulty. And Dr. Rabbi Nachman Alkein Sarach, therefore it's necessary listoim es einav, for a person to close their eyes, uletzamtzim haraus, ulechavnoi el dever shetzarach, The person has to close their eyes and contract their eyes and their vision in order to focus in on the thing that they need to be focusing in on, which is the tachlis, so that a person is not nisbalbel, a person doesn't lose themselves over the richuk, a person doesn't come to think, God forbid, that I'm actually far, or that I'm actually forgotten, or that things are not good. But a person comes to realize the tachlis of all tachlis as it needs to be, to not be nisbalbel. The gam kadeshi is chazik koyach harois v'lo yakolush. And in order to strengthen the vision, in order to strengthen the vision of the mind, I squint my eyes, va'az yuchal lirois hadavar merachok, and then I can see the thing at a distance, and then I can see the tachlis which is far from me. Because a person sarich listoi mes einav, a person needs to close their eyes ulachavin ha'estaklis al tachlis, and to focus in on the innermost point of what exists right in front of them, which is kirvas alekim litoiv, which is derech rechoika, az menachem yeshiv nafshi. And a person has to focus in on that. Ki or hatachlis hazeh hu rechoika me ha'adam, because this light of the tachlis, this light of his kashrus to the nekuda hapnimis, to the recognition that there's no richuk in the entire world, that even richuk is closeness, and that there's no tzimtzum, and everything is a hiskalis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's distance from a person. V'tamod merachok mimerchat tavilachma mirachok Hashem nirali rachok mimeni menacha v'yeshiv nafshi b'derech rechoika. The efsher liros ki'im bestimu de'einin, and a person cannot see except by way of closed eyes. That when I squint my eyes, when I look closer and farther beyond the feelings, beyond the thoughts, beyond the ruminations, beyond the reality of the circumstances, beyond the details, beyond the task at hand, beyond the responsibility and all things that need to be done at every perpetual moment, beyond all of the rational reasons to be frustrated, upset, tired, broke down, all of those things, we choose to see farther into the tachlis of all tachlis, which is mimerchat tavilachma, which is the recognition that I could only see Ribbon Shalom bestimu de'einin through the choosing to close my eyes. Shetzarich listim es ha'einayim legamri ulaskaram b'choizek yad. And the person has to close their eyes off to the distances that appear in this world, even if it means that I have to close them with my own hands to force myself to do it, to find that secret of menuchas hanefesh, to find that closeness of nishmat shadai tavinem, like we said, shindal yud is the gematria of rachok. That when I come to realize that merachok Hashem nirali, that rachok is a way of experiencing the Rabbeinu Shalom. B'derech rechoika. B'derech rechoika is how I find the Shem Havaya. B'derech rechoika. Kol rodfeh siguha bein hamitzarim. I find HaKadosh Baruch Hu specifically in that place of being chased, like the Baal Asanya says, Yisor Yisoreni Ka, that the Yisurim come from where they come from, Ka, they come from the highest experience. Because when something appears distant from me, it's a much higher level of closeness than something appearing close, because if it appears close, then Rahman al-Itzlan, I might come to think that I've arrived already. And the richuk is there in order to ensure that I never feel that I've actually arrived, and that I'm perpetually in a process of arriving, and that we're perpetually desiring for the Beis HaMikdash to be built again, and we're perpetually coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying, Lama nigara, why should I lose out on this? B'derech rechoika, but you're here also, so I'm going to transform my experience in richuk into a chelik of the Torah. And in that way, we can come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu bein hamitzarim. We can uncover the light of the Yud and the Kei, the Chachma and the Bina, the ability to have a mind that is connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that silences the ruminations of the mind and allows it to have an innermost place of calmness, of menuchas hanefesh, of menachem yeshiv nafshi, and to have a heart that feels, to have a leiv basar that is able to be vulnerable, that is able to feel those moments of distance. And instead of running away from the moments of distance, instead of assuming that the moments of distance have nothing to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to transform those moments of distance into closeness, because I realize that Hashem is close by even when I feel distant. And in that way, Miriam HaNeviah, the Merirus, could be nimtak lagamri, and it could be transformed into the light of Mibein Shnei HaKruvim, to a place that is far beyond closeness or distance. Mibein Shnei HaKruvim is the Kodesh HaKadosh, Makom HaAron Eina Min HaMidah. It's the light of Moshe Rabbeinu, that column of air that appears when we breathe down deep into ourselves and open up for ourselves those pockets of calmness, to enter into a place far beyond distance or closeness, to enter into that place of his kashrus, pnimius, belevu, benefesh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ad bias goyot tzedek, be'ezras Hashem.